Some of the strongest leaders you know are quietly driven by insecurity. More than anything else, the success they experience often becomes more dangerous as every day progresses. You see, strength without internal alignment often becomes compensation for that insecurity. True leadership maturity requires integration and not performance. So the first thing I want you to fully appreciate and understand is strength and insecurity often coexist at the same time. They're not mutually different and they're not mutually exclusive from one another. In fact, we find them cohabitating with one another on a regular basis because so much of what we're created for or taught early in life is all about performing. Many high-capacity leaders learned early that strength earned from external sources was truth. In reality, it's actually an identity trap. As a result, over time, we begin performing for an image of strength rather than embodying one or developing that integrated inner voice and that inner confidence. So much of what we do on the outside is all about how we feel on the inside. For example, while the outside world sees discipline and success and the results, the internal driver often is fear of being exposed or inadequate, or somehow feeling like we're not enough, chasing worth day after day. Most poor leadership comes from that place. It comes from that place of not having worth on the inside, and everything else we do on the outside begins to manifest itself in a way that's unhealthy for us. You see, when strength becomes performance instead of identity, you as the leader eventually exhaust yourself trying to maintain that image on a regular basis. Think about how much effort and energy you put right now into your social media, whether it's just for friends and family, whether you're using it for your business. How much of what you're creating is performance driven? That inner incongruence is what's holding you back from actually achieving the very things that you want to achieve, including meaning and significance. I think the second thing I want you to fully appreciate and understand is insecurity shows up as over control. You trying to control the inevitable, the uncontrollable. You see, insecure leaders often feel the need to control every decision, every conversation, and most of all, every outcome, because control feels safe. As a result, you struggle to delegate, because delegation exposes the fear that others might do things differently, and if I'm being honest, like in my days, that they could even do it better. It also steals the validation of feeling needed. Think about this. When you as a leader are trying to run an organization, how much has to flow through you for you to feel like it's going to be effective? Teams, meetings, decisions, choices, but yet then you're praying for peace, but you're not allowing for that because you've got so much control that you can't delegate in such a way that allows you to lead other people. That overexposure is what we fear. That overexposure feeds the fear and the insecurity, as in if we're not going to be enough. What we don't fully appreciate and realize is the greatest leaders on the planet do nothing but create better leaders. They create processes and systems and validation practices that don't come from the external world because they show up every day already feeling whole and secure. This was one of the major shifts that I had in over 30 some years of businesses myself, even after I exited a company. I still had to learn that my inner security is what's created the outer external world, whether it be in business, life, or relationships. So ask yourself, how much are you allowing for other people to take on roles, responsibilities? And how much of your nervous system, if you will, your inner security is dependent on whether or not you feel needed? One of the best things you can do as a business owner, as a leader, is get to the place where the business is running itself so you can actually focus on the visionary and the strategic task, which ultimately leads you towards fulfillment and actual meaning. Instead, we chase the significance, and because we chase the significance never comes. Think about this. As leaders, sometimes we always feel like we have to be right. We have to feel like we have to be constantly involved, or we feel like we have to be repeatedly validated just to feel good. If you were chasing that on a day in and day out basis, I guarantee you're leading towards burnout and overwhelm. That burnout and overwhelm is preventing you from performing at the highest elite levels possible. Healthy leadership, on the other hand, replaces control with clarity, with trust, with accountability. When I began building my next company, one of the things that I set out to do early on is I began setting the vision based on the core values that ultimately guided the business to begin with, one of which was autonomy and collaboration. I wanted each and every single team member to bring the best of themselves day in and day out, which is a far contrast from the man that I used to be. I used to show up at every meeting and I would have to be the only one with the ideas or shoot down everybody else's ideas. And as a result, I became the bottleneck in my own company. How many team members, how many people sitting at your desk, sitting at your table, if you will, your round table of leaders, do you actually value their opinion? Do you encourage their autonomy? Do you encourage the collaborative efforts? because that's where clarity, trust, and accountability even come from. The third thing I really want you to take away from this video is success amplifies internal fractures. Growth, money, visibility do not heal the identity wound. It does not feel the insignificance that we feel. Instead, it magnifies everything that comes outside of us. So whatever you're feeling, it's magnified as the existing leader. If insecurity exists at a small scale, then everything around that multiplies when pressure compounds that creates a magnitude of insecurity more than how we actually feel. Which is why you need to make sure that you're paying attention to the actual fractures that are actually happening in and around you. Pay attention to the moments where you feel like you're not enough. Become self-aware, realizing that how you lead is a byproduct of how you feel. And how you feel ultimately has to determine what you do next. Start controlling how you feel by being present in the moment and at the right time. As influence grows, the leader often feels more exposed rather than more secure, which is why you have to start small in order to win big. This is why leaders must address the identity and the alignment before scale magnifies the fractures. Or you'll do like I do and spend multiple years going back and fixing broken areas of the company that could have been structured properly to begin with. The fourth major thing I want you to get really, really clear on is integrated leaders don't perform for authority. Instead, they embody authority. They let authority come with being grounded and regulated and being one of the best listeners in the room. You see, authority comes from performance is fragile because it depends on the perception instead of your actual character. However, if you're shaping your character with healthy stewardship, with healthy discipleship and leadership, ultimately what happens is you become a presence. You can walk into a room and simply sit down and be present with your team, and your team will gravitate towards that energy because you're not trying to control them or the environment around you. Integrated leaders speak with calm conviction because they are not trying to prove anything. Imagine for just a moment if you sat down in a meeting where you normally have to go in and create this anxious environment because you feel like you have to control or lead or the perception of leadership. In other words, you go in with a perception feeling like your team has to see you as a leader. Now imagine the contrast to that. Imagine if you went into the same meeting just being a leader, not performing for it, not chasing for it, not striving for it, but simply being. Oftentimes the most powerful person in a room is typically the most quiet, the one who's assessing and listening, the one who can actually repeat back words like what I hear you say is. How many times could you actually validate your key leaders to bring them into a closer collaborative effort if we just listened? Integrated leaders don't perform, they embody. The next time you sit down with them, whether it's a spouse, a coworker, even yourself with a journal, I want you to begin to ask a couple of key questions. One, who am I being and who am I embodying? Think about the most profound leader that you admire the most. Are they grounded? Are they regulated? Are they stable? Or are they anxious and confused and fearful and insecure? How you feel in the moment determines what you embody in the present moment. So if you feel insecure, you're going to embody the insecurity, which is why you can break this down and ask yourself those questions. Who am I being in this moment? And what am I embodying in this moment? If you want to embody confidence, take 4 or 5 deep breaths, soak it in, and think about confidence. Feel confidence, embody the confidence. That will begin to shape your integrated character, not your insecure-based character. Integrated leaders' authority flows from internal congruence because your beliefs, your values, and your action are all in 100% alignment. You are bringing that which is distraction and you're bringing it into congruence. You're bringing it into ultimate alignment up and down. When identity and character align, leadership becomes quietly powerful rather than loudly defensive. Which takes us to the 5th and final point for today. Security is built through stewardship. There's no other way to do it. You can't build it by chasing, you can't build it by striving, and you can't do it by performing. However, you can do it through stewardship. Insecure leadership focuses on proving worth, while mature leadership focuses on stewarding responsibility. Do you see yourself as a steward of leadership? Do you see yourself as a steward of team? Do you see yourself stewarding a mission? Do you see yourself stewarding yourself? Stewarding does not react. Stewarding has a presence-based response. That presence-based response is what leads you to freedom because you're not proving, you're embodying. Stewardship shifts the leader's mindset from I must prove I deserve this to I must care for what has been given. I must take what has been given to me and I must compound it for the future. Always remember, when leadership embraces stewardship, pressure decreases because your identity is no longer tied to the outcome. Your identity is now tied to who you're becoming, which is far more important than what you're obtaining. That's when confidence becomes calm, stable, and grounded instead of reactive. So as you begin to lead into this next week, I want to encourage you to ask yourself, who am I being and who am I embodying? And if you like this, I want you to like, share, and comment. Please share this with a friend. So many people need this content, and we want to make sure it gets out to them. In the meantime, if you want to check out the One Part Line and One Part Land podcast, you can do so right here. And if you want to get more learning direct to camera just like this, you can click right here.